It was just a nudge barely enough to rattle a mirror. But what happened next would end with rotor blades tearing the sky open and a town learning the hard way. You never touch a ghost still wearing his war face. The man on the bike didn't see a clumsy misstep, he saw a target. A wrinkled back, a threadbare coat, and a reason to feel powerful for 5 seconds. One snap of knuckles, and 90-year-old Thomas Grady hit the asphalt like a paper doll. His hand never let go of the plastic bag he'd just bought groceries in. The street paused, but only for breath. Phones stayed pocketed. Conversations resumed like nothing happened. Not one hand extended. But 33 minutes later, that silence died, screaming. The clouds seemed to split open. A monstrous roar swept over Park Avenue as a UH-60 Blackhawk hovered like a vengeful god. It descended fast, sharp, intentional. Figures spilled out in black tactical gear. Helmets, visors, boots made for war. Because this wasn't just any senior citizen with stiff knees and an old coat. This was somebody's commander. Somebody's family, and their eyes never stopped watching. If you believe strength doesn't disappear with age, if you think history walks among us every day, hit that like button, smash respect in the comments, and buckle up. Because what you're about to hear is the kind of story that changes how you see quiet people forever. Most folks passed by Thomas Grady like he was part of the scenery, an old man in faded jeans and cracked boots, tracing the same sidewalk to the corner cafe every Friday morning without fail, 90 years old. Former Navy engineer, 4 tours, 3 medals, 1 knee that hadn't bent properly since 1972. Thomas never asked for gratitude, and he didn't trade war stories for coffee. He wanted warmth, silence, and the dignity of being left alone. That morning, the wind was sharp. His coat, military surplus from the Reagan year, hung on his shoulders like armor, still on duty. The old patch on his chest, long faded, used to read T.E. Grady. He stepped out of a corner bodega, clutching a small bag, a loaf of rye, throat lozenges, and a postcard he planned to mail to his great-granddaughter, who just started basic training. Across the street, a pack of bikers crowded around a row of glimmering motorcycles. Their laughter rolled like thunder. Chrome flashed in the winter sun. Thomas didn't even flinch. He'd heard worse sounds in places that bled silence after gunfire. As he passed, his coat brushed one of the bikes barely, just a tug on a handlebar. The bike didn't fall. It rocked, gently. Thomas froze. Instinct took over. He turned back, hands raised, posture apologetic. "Didn't mean to touch it, son. Guess I'm bulkier than I thought," he said with a half-smile, genuine, not mocking. Just a man trying to be courteous. But the biggest biker, bearded, shades on, and puffed up like a prizefighter, stepped forward. No words, no checking the bike, just a cold hand and a sudden slap, open-palmed, brutal. Thomas hit the ground with a grunt, the grocery bag tearing as he fell. The bread rolled into the gutter, untouched but no longer clean. Laughter sparked behind him. Bar patrons clinked glasses. One guy leaned back in his chair to get a better view. Not a soul moved. Thomas didn't yell. He didn't rage. He simply pushed himself up slowly, one knee trembling, breath caught somewhere between shame and fatigue. He gathered the bread, now dotted with gravel and grease, and put it gently back in the bag, like it still meant something. He wasn't holding on to food, he was holding on to order. A couple crossed the street, eyes fixed anywhere but on him. A waitress behind the diner window glanced once, then turned away like it hadn't happened. The biker who struck him lit a cigarette and went right back to bragging. Not a trace of guilt, just the certainty that no one would stop him, not for an old man with a limp and a name no one remembered. Thomas braced against the iron post beside the bus bench. His cane had rolled several feet away. He hobbled over to retrieve it, each step like lifting iron. His face didn't flinch at the pain, but the humiliation etched every muscle. He sat slowly. The bench creaked. The air burned his lungs as he tried to inhale calmly. His hearing aid buzzed faintly, but his pride rang louder. Back in 1969, he'd hauled 2 wounded men out of a burning transport truck outside Da Nang. Today, no one would hand him a napkin to clean the blood from his split lip. A teen walked past, headphones in, hoodie pulled up. Thomas raised a hand just slightly, but the boy didn't look, or maybe he chose not to. Thomas didn't want pity. He wanted proof he was still seen. Inside the bar, the biker leaned back, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. "Old man should watch where he's going. Damn near wrecked my ride," he chuckled. The group laughed with him. No fear, no guilt. Just that dangerous kind of certainty, the kind that ends when the past knocks on the door and it's wearing boots. He'd been called many things across a lifetime that didn't give out trophies. Lieutenant, husband, grandfather, squad leader, but never once had the word worthless landed in his ears. Still, Thomas Grady said nothing. He adjusted the collar of his coat, wiped the blood from his lip with the edge of his sleeve, and reached into his jacket pocket. Inside sat a relic of a phone more scratched than screen, its buttons worn like old bones. On that flickering display, one contact remained untouched for years. It read, "Falcon 0, use only if breathing." He tapped it once, just once, then leaned back against the bench like he had all the time in the world. 15 minutes passed. Thomas didn't move, didn't wince, didn't look like a man with a bruise or a complaint. He sat like a statue still, straight, and focused, waiting for a bus no one else knew was scheduled to arrive. Then the vibration came, faint, like a warning whispered from underground. The concrete began to hum. A few diners paused mid-bite. A man outside the bar shaded his eyes, squinting toward the tree line. And then the sound arrived, fully formed, thundering, pulsing rhythm that made pint glasses jitter against tabletops. The bartender stepped into the doorway, frowning. "That's no damn semi," he muttered. And it wasn't. From beyond the horizon, through the trees that bordered the edge of town, came a shape the color of war and vengeance. Black Hawk helicopter flying low, fast, and locked on a course for the town square. Phones flew into hands. Dogs barked wildly from car windows. Drivers slowed. Shoppers froze. The Black Hawk dipped hard, blades chopping the cold air like a warning, and descended into the vacant lot behind the shops like it had a score to settle. Then, from the other end of the block, a matte black SUV fishtailed into place outside the bar. Brakes screamed. Doors flung open. Then boots, 12 pairs hitting pavement in unison. They didn't shout. They didn't run. They moved with the eerie precision of men who had executed more dangerous things than a midday arrival in a small town. Tactical gear. Clean movements. No wasted breath. These weren't mall cops. They were soldiers' ghosts in black, trained not just to fight but to finish. From the chopper, a man stepped out. No shades, no gun, just gravity in his walk. The kind that pulls attention like a black hole. Early 50s. Broad frame. Steeled jaw. Eyes like winter. He didn't ask directions. He walked straight to the bench. Thomas looked up, blinked once, and gave a short nod. No salute, no words, just recognition. The man dropped to one knee. "Dad," he said, brushing blood from Thomas's weathered cheek. "I came the second I got the call." Thomas didn't reply. He didn't need to. Behind him, the biker still leaning near his crew, arms crossed and oblivious to the new weight pressing on the air, finally noticed the silence. He turned. Then he saw them. The soldiers. The patch on the kneeling man's shoulder. U.S. Army Special Operations. Commander Grady. Everything inside the biker froze. He had just backhanded the father of a war-hardened commander, and now the air felt too thick to breathe. Nobody laughed now. The bar was a tomb. The biker's leather vest creaked as his shoulders straightened instinctively. His grin smug one vanished like morning fog. Commander Grady rose from his knees slowly, every motion deliberate, deadly calm. His hands rested loosely at his sides. No weapon, no threat, just presence. Behind him, his men moved like shadow and flame fanning out, closing the space until the block felt like a cage. Still no weapons drawn. But everyone stood straighter, the way people do when danger walks right past, polite. Thomas stayed on the bench. He bowed his head not in shame, but in respect. Quiet acknowledgement. A low murmur rolled through the bar. The music had stopped. A bartender ducked behind the counter, phone forgotten in her grip. Someone peeked through the blinds and backed away fast. The biker took one unsteady step back as Commander Grady approached, voice calm, tone like metal. "Which one of you laid hands on a veteran?" No answer. "Not right away." Then a shuffle. The biker stepped forward just enough, arms half up, palms exposed in mock surrender. "Hey, man," he walked into my bike, he said with a laugh too nervous to land. "Was just some old guy. No big deal." Grady didn't flinch. That old guy was fighting wars before you could spell your own damn name. A few phones caught the moment. Someone whispered, "Oh no," under their breath. The biker scoffed, trying to puff himself up again. "So what? You military boys think you can drop in and act like you own everything?" Grady stepped forward once. Just once. But it was enough to erase all distance between bravery and regret. "I didn't come here to posture," he said, voice smooth and cold. "I came here because my father bled on a street while cowards watched. I came here because men like you think silence is a shield." He turned his head just slightly, lifting a finger toward one of the soldiers. No words, just a gesture. The soldier nodded once, touched a comm unit at his collar, and muttered something into the receiver. 2 minutes later, a police cruiser rounded the corner. No sirens, just lights flashing cold and steady. And this time, the cops weren't here to ask who started it. The officers didn't look excited. They looked aware, alert. "No need for a briefing, Commander," Grady simply pointed. And they knew. The cuffs closed with the kind of finality that didn't need drama. No yelling, no wrestling, just resolution. The biker didn't fight it. Couldn't. The sound of those cuffs changed everything. His bravado dissolved instantly, dripping off like cheap paint in a downpour. He kept his head down now. No more swagger, as the officers guided him toward the cruiser. Across the block, something shifted, an invisible veil lifting. Windows cracked open, doors creaked ajar. People stepped out like they'd been frozen, and the thaw had just begun. Thomas still sat on the bench, his hands folded over his cane, face calm, unreadable. Commander Grady walked back slowly, kneeling once more until their eyes met. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Thomas gave a slight nod, then offered something faint, almost a smile. "I've had worse," he muttered, then added more quietly, "just not in front of so many who didn't move a damn muscle." The words lingered like smoke in a closed room. A woman stepped forward, mid-60s maybe, silver hair tied back, eyes lowered. She held out a folded, clean handkerchief with both hands. "I should have said something," she whispered. I'm sorry." Thomas accepted it gently, nodded, said nothing, but something began to crack open. A young man by the cafe took off his cap. A father hoisted his daughter onto his shoulders and pointed toward Thomas, whispering. A small boy, maybe 10, stood still, raised his hand in a crooked salute. It wasn't practiced, but it was real. The crowd around the bar shifted. Phones dropped, hands extended. Not one person cheered. Not one tried to turn it into a moment for themselves. It wasn't loud. It was reverent. One man in a plaid shirt stepped forward, standing at attention, shoulders squared, back rigid. A retired sailor. Another joined him, sleeves rolled to reveal a faded Air Force tattoo. And suddenly, a line formed, a row of men and women, shoulder to shoulder, quietly standing, not just in respect, but in recognition. Commander Grady stepped back. He let it happen. His unit stayed still, heads lowered slightly, not because of orders, but because they understood this moment had nothing to do with them. It was for a man who had never demanded thanks, but today, finally, could not be ignored. Thomas sat up a bit straighter, not with pride, but with release, like a burden had been quietly lifted. It wasn't about the slap anymore. It hadn't been for a while. It was about every day he had been passed over, underestimated, dismissed, and now finally seen. By sundown, the video was already online. No filter, no soundtrack, just real-time footage. The hit, the silence, the descent of the Black Hawk, the arrest. No one needed to dramatize it. The moment spoke for itself. Respect the elder. That's what people typed. Thomas Grady, quiet strength. By midnight, local stations ran the story. By morning, national broadcasts had picked it up. But they didn't just show the clip, they told the man's story. Lieutenant Thomas Grady, Navy engineer, Desert Storm, Bosnia, 3 Bronze Stars, 1 Purple Heart, and up until yesterday, almost entirely forgotten. The bar put out a weak statement, something about an unfortunate incident and not representative of our values. But the town remembered the laughter, the inaction, the indifference, and they weren't in the mood to forgive it. The mayor phoned Grady's son personally, wanted to hold a community event in his father's honor. Grady gave one condition: if it's for him not, the camera she'll come. Within 7 days, the town green was transformed. A temporary stage, dozens of chairs, the middle school choir rehearsing the Star-Spangled Banner. No banners, no sponsors, just purpose. Thomas arrived in a wheelchair, not because he couldn't walk, but because this time, someone finally offered to push, and he let them. As the crowd rose hundreds, maybe more, there was no applause at first. Just weight, reverence, recognition. Because dignity, once reclaimed, spreads like wildfire. The mayor spoke first, reading from a typed page, but what everyone remembered was his son. Commander Grady stepped to the microphone, paused, let silence carry meaning. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't strike back. He didn't need to. He turned to look at Thomas, eyes bright. He taught me what strength is, and now the world sees it too. He stepped down. Thomas didn't speak. He didn't have to. He simply raised one hand low, deliberate, steady, a gesture that said everything. The standing ovation lasted nearly 4 full minutes, not for medals, not for revenge, but for every quiet act of courage that had gone unnoticed until now. The letter came unexpected. No return address. Handwritten in shaky strokes on paper, creased like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. Just 6 words. If you'll meet me, I'll listen. It was from the biker. At first, Thomas Grady didn't react. No one would have faulted him for tossing it aside. He had every reason to turn the page and leave it blank. But there was something in the uneven, rushed, and smudged at the corners that brought back the memory of another broken man from long ago. One of his own. A soldier. Angry. Haunted. But not beyond saving. Thomas asked his son to arrange a quiet meeting before the court hearing. No cameras. No uniforms. Just a bare courthouse room with too much light and not enough warmth. The man who'd once struck him sat waiting, shoulders slumped, leather jacket gone, replaced by a plain shirt. His hands were clenched tight, like he expected a sentence instead of a conversation. Thomas entered slowly, every step deliberate. He sat without a word, that stillness the same he'd once used in work-witted the air between them. I didn't know who you were, the biker said at last, voice brittle. Thomas tilted his head slightly. That's the problem, he replied. You didn't care. The biker's jaw twitched. His eyes darted down. My dad was in Nam. Came home different. Not himself. I blamed the uniform for taking him and never giving him back. Thomas nodded. I knew men like that. Gave everything. Came home with less. There was no anger in his tone. No judgment. Just truth. And that truth stood taller than ego. The biker, his name was Kyle, sniffed hard, rubbed his face with his sleeve, then pushed a folded form across the table. Court said I had to, but I want to. Signed up for therapy, volunteering at the VA downtown, trying to earn something back. Thomas looked at the paper, then looked at Kyle. He reached out and placed his calloused hand over the younger man's. You won't earn it quick, but if you show up every day, you'll get there. Kyle nodded. Tears now. Real ones. That meeting didn't go viral. It didn't hit the news, but it changed 2 lives in a silent, echoing way that never left the room. 6 months later, the corner of Halstead and Evermont looked different. Where once there was silence and blood, there now stood a bronze plaque on a polished stone slab. It read, in honor of Lieutenant Thomas Grady, a quiet shield between chaos and us. Beneath it, a line carved deeper than the rest. He never asked to be seen. He simply stood. People stopped there now. Not everyone, not always, but enough. Students left poppies and hand-drawn notes on Veterans Day. A muralist painted Thomas's outline into a long wall of hometown heroes. And the city council? They voted unanimously to rename the little park behind the bar. Now it was called Grady Square. Thomas still came on Fridays. Same boots, same olive coat, same careful steps. But now someone always greeted him first. A skateboarder giving a respectful nod. A new recruit crossing the street to shake his hand. A dad pointing him out to his sonnet as a legend, but as an example. Kyle, the man who had once lashed out in ignorance, now drove vets to the VA clinic twice a week. He wore no stripes, no rank, but his actions were starting to fit like a quiet kind of uniform. Sometimes, Thomas would see him in the diner helping an elderly vet into a seat, carrying groceries for a woman with a walker. They didn't exchange speeches. Just small nods, quiet acknowledgments between two men walking the same road now, from different ends. Commander Grady only came back once after the ceremony. He and his father sat on that same bench, the one where everything had changed. No long talk, no formalities. After a few minutes, the son simply said, "You showed them, Dad. You changed this place." Thomas smiled faintly, his eyes on a boy tying a flag to his bicycle nearby. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe they just remembered what matters." That night, as the wind moved through the branches near the old bar, you could almost hear it again. The thrum of distant rotors, not real, but remembered. Not from above this time, but from within. And if you stood there long enough, if you listened with enough stillness, you could hear the moment this town stood still. Because one man refused to fall alone. If you believe respect should never come too late. If you believe some uniforms are never truly removed, hit like, type honor in the comments, and subscribe to us. Because sometimes, the quietest voices move the world the most.